What is a showstopper? To Dave Cutler, it was any bug that stopped the release of Windows NT. In 1988, Dave Cutler joined Microsoft. He left digital and moved over to Microsoft because he wanted a challenge of creating an operating system. Bill Gates knew that Microsoft had to push outside of the bounds that it was already set. And this was the premise for this book, Showstopper, a fantastic history of the making of Windows NT. Now, NT is an operating system that all of you will know about, and certainly one that I love very dearly. However, at the time, it was something transformational. Microsoft had worked with IBM since around 1980 when they licensed DOS to sit on the IBM PC. And Microsoft was looking at continuing that path by working with IBM on OS/2. And that had been the original plan for Bill Gates, to go down that path and have the operating system come from IBM's side. When he brought over Dave Cutler and his digital team, and they proposed building an operating system that was completely independent of the platform that it sat on, this transformed the way that Microsoft approached everything. This book goes into all the detail about how that came to be and what an extraordinary vision it was that Dave Cutler and his team had. At the time, operating systems were geared to the hardware that they sat on. An operating system for a version of Unix was geared to the hardware that it was on, as was VMS. And Windows was very much geared towards sitting on an IBM PC. And of course, Apple had its System 7, System 8 operating systems that went on Apple Macintosh hardware. But NT was a brand new concept. It was going to have a hardware abstraction layer, the HAL. It was going to be able to sit on different platforms, RISC platform, MIPS platform, DEC Alpha platform, and it would sit on the IBM PC platform. The book goes through some fantastic stories of what it took to make this operating system and how a showstopper was something that could not be tolerated if they were going to meet their deadline of getting this released to the public in 1994. And I've got a lot of time for the people that were involved in this project. They went through phenomenal amounts of effort in order to get this operating system put out. It would not be unfair to say that most of the teams involved in this barely saw their families. They would have been working 80, 90, 100-hour weeks in Washington. Yes, they were reasonably well paid and remunerated for it, but the sacrifices that many people gave were absolutely immeasurable, and you get into the details in that in the book. You see how people are allocated separate parts of the operating system, and certainly one part that always appealed to me was the user profile section of the operating system, because this was transformational with NT. It hadn't been done before. That was the part that enabled a multi-user operating system and for you to have your own configuration in the GUI. This goes into detail how one person was allocated that part of the operating system. They were given the user profile. I tried to dig in and find out who might have been responsible for System Policy Editor, but it's almost impossible to know that now. I suspect it was the person who did user profile, or certainly somebody connected to them, that was responsible for that. Bill Gates has to be thanked in this for his patience to keep this running, because the project overran and overran and overran. And even though there were some amazing project managers who drove this home and enabled the operating system to come together, it took some patience from Gates to let OS/2 go and continue to trust in NT, particularly with the nature of how Dave Cutler is reported to have operated. He was a highly intelligent and highly skilled programmer and developer and software engineer, but he was also really difficult to work for. And that's been seen in many a software company. Steve Jobs was legendary famous for sweeping engineers' desks off if work wasn't good enough. And from my reading in this book, I think Dave Cutler probably operated in similar ways. He was a tough cookie to work for, but he also was known to heavily reward people that delivered on the vision and the dream that he had for NT. NT eventually deployed in 1993 and 1994, starting out with its version at 3.5 and going to 3.51 and then moving on to version 4.0 and right up to the modern day to 11, because that kernel operating system has not changed. And many people will turn around and say, oh, I can't believe how old the operating system is from Microsoft. And you'll see YouTube videos where people go, this bit of code here still existed from this point in time. the reason for that is because this operating system was revolutionary when it was made, and it is almost, be fair to say, one of a kind, in the same way that when Unix was originally developed, it was one of a kind. NT is something rather special, and that's why it still exists in 2026, even though it was first dreamed and created in the mind of a man in 1988. And that is something rather special, which is why I wanted to do a brief video to talk about that book. If you love NT as much as I love NT, or it was part of your career and you had no choice but to love it, I can only wholeheartedly recommend you get Showstopper. It wasn't too hard to get hold of. You can get a copy on eBay. You can probably find a copy on Amazon as well. It is a great read. For anybody that's worked in the history of IT, that is a fantastic read, and I highly recommend it. If you do enjoy any of these talking head videos, please leave a comment, let me know. I enjoy doing them, but I don't know if everybody else enjoys watching them, so I'd love to know. If you subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so that you get notification when I drop a new video. I am trying to do one every week as much as I possibly can, but one of those might be a members video. We'll have to wait and see. But I am really trying to do as much as I possibly can in content, because I really love telling the stories of everything that I've ever worked on. And thank you for listening to this video. I'll see you on the next one. Ta-da!